So good morning, everybody. Welcome to the 2023 SYEP PBL New Project Plan Review. Today, we're going to be looking at the two newest project plans that have been added to the mix for project-based learning this summer. And they are SYEP Pride and Healthy Community. So today, what we're going to spend some time doing is just going through some of the fundamental stuff that we always bring to the table when we talk to folks about working with young people. A big part of why some of this stuff is redundant, if you've been in some of the other things with us, is because we never know who's in the room and who's available to show up for trainings. So we want to make sure that we're pretty consistent with our messages across the board, regardless of when you show up for trainings with us. So like I said, if folks can just make sure you drop your name and org in the chat, that'd be greatly appreciated. Hey, Ms. Judith, how you doing? See you. So this is really your time to ask questions about the process, right? A lot of you are doing some planning right now. Think about to submit your plans if you haven't submitted your plans already. So really, this is the time for you to start asking questions about how to really incorporate these things into your summer. Contractual questions, as usual, I will not be able to answer those, but if there's some that come up, if you drop them in the chat, I'll try to make sure that somebody from DYCD gets a hold of these and gets responses back to you all about those things. We will take a 5-minute break. During that break, I'm actually going to show a video that's kind of relevant to what we're talking about in terms of healthy community, which will be about 5 minutes. So feel free to either, take your break and do what you want, or stick around and watch the video. And like I said, this is really your opportunity to ask questions. All right. So before we get started, does anybody have any questions? Oh, all right. So we'll be on for about 2 hours, maybe a little bit longer. We're going to do a little bit of group work. Just to get folks' juices flowing, and so for some folks that this might be new to, give you an opportunity to see some elements of what project-based learning kind of look like in action. All right. So let's kick it off. The agenda, welcome. We're really going to obviously talk about the importance of relationships, especially when we're talking about having conversations with young people about topics and going through perspectives and things like that. As we move through the summer, the importance of relationships and how we rely on young people's relationships with each other and relationships with us as facilitators and or who your facilitators might be is extremely critical to the success of your project. Whether you actually complete a project or, we'll talk about what that means also in a little bit as well. So we'll jump into the SYEP Pride project plan. We'll look at the Healthy Community project plan. We'll talk about some helpful resources, and then we'll wrap up and close. So it should be a relatively smooth, quick day and get you out of here on time so you can get back to your SYEP planning. All right. So as we get started, one of the first things that I would like to know is what kind of programs are you guys running this summer? A few years ago, we started doing this. Obviously, everyone was virtual, but I've just launched a poll, and I'm very curious to hear what kind of models folks will be having this summer, what that experience will be like for you. Well, a lot of folks will be hybrid. A lot of hybrid models out here, a lot of hybrid. I almost have full participation, just a couple more folks we're waiting for. So it seems like the majority of folks will be doing the virtual option. I mean the hybrid option. And I'm just really curious to hear what that's going to look like for some folks. If you could just, unmute and just share really quickly what your program structure is going to look like by hybrid. First week only in person, and then the rest is virtual. What are folks doing?
For us at CCCS, good morning, everyone. We're going to do 2 days virtual and then 1 day in person.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Other folks, what are you going to be doing this summer? Who has no idea? Oh, no, go ahead, Jessica. I saw you unmute yourself.
At Queens Community House, good morning, everyone. At Queens Community House, our career-ready students will be 100% in person at their high schools. And then for our community-based students, we'll do 3 days virtual, 1 day in person. I'm hoping to do maybe like a career panel, Hall of Science in the works, but fingers crossed.
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you. Let me know if you get that Hall of Science trip planned. Everybody, Theo will travel this summer. All right. Theo will travel. Talk to me. What else are folks doing? Because that's very tough to manage. Talk to me. What else? What are other folks doing? Oh, feels like I'm in the first day of SYEP out here. No cameras on and nobody wants to talk. All right. Y'all will feel the pain too. Don't worry about it. Go ahead, Miss Henry.
Good morning. How are you? PBL.
PBL.
We're gonna do a hybrid session. To be honest, our number is so large, we're not prepared to be fully 1%, 100% in person. I'm still playing around with the planning, to be very candid. We're trying to figure out how to get it that 25% in person. So one of the things that we're playing around with is having trips that will align with the project. So because our numbers are so large, we have 7 overall projects that we host. And within that, we may have anywhere from 4 to 6 groups under each of the 7 projects that we host. So we have almost a little bit over 900.
I'm gonna say that's close to 1,000. I'm gonna say that's close to 1,000 younger youth.
Yeah, we have about almost close to 1,000 YY. So that's the challenge, right? How to get them out, get them safe in that 25 percentile. And that's a large undertaking for me to have gone. I love virtual. I can control it, but I do understand. I understand they need to go out. You know what I mean? But for me, it's just like, oh, but it's so safe right here, and it just works wonderful. But so we're still trying to work it out. I'm hoping I hear some ideas or something. I'm a little bit overwhelmed, a little anxious right now because I want to get it going. Usually by now we have the PBLs down pat, but now it's how to incorporate it to make this hybrid work, you know? So that's where I'm at.
Excellent. Thank you. Because that's a big part of like what some of the discussion will be around. Like, how do we create these other activities around PBL that really do help support the process, right? And that's what we'll definitely spend some time talking about today. So, and like I said, this is your opportunity to ask questions, right? So if something's coming up and you're planning right now and you're like, well, wait, I need to know how this fits in here. Stop me, please, folks. This is what this is about. All right. So thank you for that, Ms. Henry. Anybody else want to share?
Theo, it's me on the phone.
Got you.
Can you hear me? All right. Good morning, everyone. We're going to be doing the hybrid thing as well. Our community likes the virtual, so I don't know how much pushback I'm going to get with it. I'm feeling kind of mixed emotions about it because logistically, with the summer rising, and our building is going to have 4 programs in it. So just moving 250 young people once a week in and through the building without stepping on too many toes is a concern for me. And also to fit in trips when technically you're doing 12 and a half hours of service, right? Because we're in central Brooklyn. So by the time we get anywhere, we've already spent an hour getting there. So
I'm sorry.
It'll be a combination of trips and workshops.
Who is this?
This is Judy from Sesame Life.
Judith. Oh, okay, I got you. Oh, you're calling it. You're on. Oh, okay, I got you.
Yeah.
Okay, I got
I'm
you.
still kind of in the Stone Age with my computer setup.
Gotcha. I was like, what's going on here? All right, cool. Mm-hmm. Thanks, Judith. Yeah. We'll talk about that as well, right? And these are the questions, these are the kind of concerns that I think are really important to folks, right? How are we going to accommodate this 25%? And folks have actually gotten very accustomed to being virtual. Like, as much as we want to talk about like, oh, the only people that don't like it is us. Like, the kids are starting to like kind of get used to it, right? And the other thing about it is it's much easier to play videos. It's much easier to play music. It's much easier to bring technology into the space. And I think that's when, if you're doing those things virtually, you can really have a very fruitful, impactful program. But when you just have an adult talking to boxes and showing a deck every time, that gets tough, right? So that's the importance of like being really intentional of how we design our programs, right? And I love the fact that folks are putting so much thought into this. And the reality of this is, if folks need to jump on a call with me at some point, please email me. I will make time to figure out how to help support you during that planning process as well. Right? All right. Let's move forward. Intentional. I don't know how many of y'all have ever met me before or been in a training with me before. This word should be associated with me. If you ever see me on the street and you don't, and I'm like, what's my favorite I word? And you don't go intentional, that's a problem, okay? We have to be extremely intentional in how we plan our programs, right? We're not doing project-based learning with our young people to see them do a project. Is everybody clear on that? The final project is not why we're doing project-based learning. The final project is great if it happens, but that is not why we do project-based learning. Project-based learning has been implemented through this process as a very intentional strategy to teach young people work readiness skills and strategies, right? When I went out for a site visit, I had the opportunity to do this last summer. One of the first things the young people said to me was, for a fact, this young lady said that going through this process helped her improve her communication. She was very clear that going through this process helped her, and knowing that going into the school year coming up, she felt more prepared to talk and engage with people than the rest of her peers. She was very clear about that, right? So understanding that this, when done correctly, really does impact what we want young people to learn, so that they not only get jobs when they're 16 and 17, but they also know how to keep those jobs, right? So we have to be extremely intentional in our process to make sure young people walk out of here with the skills we want them to walk out of here with, right? Now, you all know we'll have another couple other trainings, some PBL refreshers, another PBL 101, I think we have 2 more of those, right? Where we'll really dive into really what it means in program design. But today we're really here to focus more about these new project plans, right? And like I said, if folks have any questions at any point about any of this stuff, please feel free to stop me or email me at a later point, all right? So a little bit about our model. You know, it's really grounded in making sure that we're supporting young people as they solve real world problems that are really relevant to them, right? And they're through collaboration and problem solving and critical thinking and all these other key employable skills, right? That's what I'm talking about. These are the things that when we're at work sometimes, when we see people not doing these things, we're like, how'd you get this job? We want to make sure our young people aren't those folks later in life, all right? So we need to be very intentional, right? And in this model, we're talking about engaging youth in this co-design and co-construction of their own education, right? All we're really doing is giving them a theme. The theme, the overarching theme of SYEP Pride or Healthy Community, as you will see, has endless possibilities to where young people can take it, right? Endless possibilities. All you've done is given them one small parameter, right? Big part of what we also talk about is making sure that this notion of connectedness, that all young people do things through relationships, not just young people, we do things through relationships as well, right? So we need to make sure that as we're thinking about this in-person time that we have with our young people, what are we really doing with them during that time? You know, are we thinking about taking 10 to 15 minutes before we go on that trip to do some sort of team building exercise, so that young people are getting to engage and interact with each other in a very meaningful way, so that when they get back in those boxes, they're connected to something, right? So how are we making sure that during those times when we're in person, we're being very heavy on developing relationships? Career panels are great, but career panels can really happen amazingly on Zoom, because it doesn't matter where those folks come from, right? Those folks can be in California and be on Zoom. That used to not be the case when we had these things, right? We had to wait till somebody was in town, or we had to pay for somebody to come speak to people, or it was just like, oh, maybe we'll just find a YouTube video of this person talking. Right now, we can use Zoom to bring in people from all across the world to talk to our young people, right? But really making sure that we're centering this notion of connectedness in our program. And it's not something that's very front-loaded, right? Like if you're meeting with your young people in person throughout the course of the summer, making sure you're doing some level of relationships with them each time you're meeting with them in person. I had the opportunity, like I said, to go visit some sites. And we did this team building exercise right before they did their presentations, to get themselves kind of calm and relaxed. The first thing the kids said was, why haven't we been doing this all summer? That was the first thing the kids said. They were like, yo, we wish we had this ball with all these questions on it, and we've been playing this all summer long. Like, why were we doing this all summer long, right? So even the kids recognize the importance of them doing relationship building exercises, right? And making sure that they're actually connecting, because those relationships, like I said, are going to be what really do hold that group together when the summer starts getting long, when things start getting difficult, when the air conditioning is not working in the building, right? That's when those relationships are really going to matter, okay? And then when we're talking about preparation, we're really talking about developing those skills with our young people that not only help them get that job, but keep their job, right? That's the important piece. But a big piece of project-based learning is this authentic participation, right? Young people aren't just showing up to sit in on PBL workshops, right? They're not just showing up to get work readiness workshops. They actually have meaningful roles in your program as young people, as leaders. When they're in workshops, they can have roles. They don't have to just sit there and take in information. There can be people that have to take notes. They can be people that have to document the process, take pictures. There are all sorts of things that can happen during a workshop that enhance that experience, so young people aren't just sitting there listening to adults talk at them. Right? So we have to make sure that if we're going to prepare them if we're going to talk about giving them those skills, we have to actually give them those opportunities throughout the course of the program to demonstrate those skills. And that's through giving them those meaningful roles. Any questions about this? No? So, breaking down connectedness a little bit more, right? Like I said, really placing relationships at the center of our systems and structures and staff behavior, right? All your staff need to understand that it's really important for, if you've got the 6 groups under one topic and you got 1,000 kids and you got 50 instructors, all 50 instructors need to know that we're placing relationships at the center of our systems and structures. All of them need to know that. Not just some of them, right? Because what'll happen is you'll see the difference between the young people's engagement and those that actually prioritize relationship building and those that don't, right? And we're creating this environment that really does promote connectedness. And we'll talk about a few other things we can do, right? Because connection is key. So we have to make sure that young people understand that we care, that they're not just in this program, right? We are literally doing project-based learning with these young people to help prepare them for the next step in their future, which is employment. They need to understand that it's important for us in the work that we do with them to gain skills and knowledge in this process. They need to understand that we trust us, right? So that requires a level of consistency, right? And then through relationship building, we're really building this sense of belonging, right? Young people won't turn on their cameras until they feel like you care, like they can trust you, and like they belong in the space. No matter what you do, if you don't take care of those things, you can make it mandatory, and those kids will still turn on their cameras and walk away. And you'll be looking at an empty chair, because that's what I would do. I'd be like, oh, you want my camera on? Bet. My camera's on. Deuces, right? What are you going to say? My camera's on, right? So a big part of that is also this notion of reciprocity, which is, like I said, really making sure that young people understand that this is a two-way relationship, right? And that especially when we're talking about project-based learning, in the beginning, as you're the facilitator and you're developing relationships and you're doing a lot of this work up front, it will be a lot more on you. It'll be a lot more like 80-20 on you. But then that starts to shift over the course of the relationship building and the project getting going. And now we're talking about this co-facilitation. We're talking about this co-production of what will ultimately be their final product or their final presentation. Right? Which leads us to community norms, something that we definitely talk about a whole lot more when we do PBL 101, and the real importance of how we use community norms to help guide behavior in our programs, right? And really using these and leaning on these, right? And understanding that these are something that come from the young people, and it's not something that when they get into the room, you go, okay, guys, these are our community agreements. Right now, that's not the way this works, right? And being clear that community agreements aren't something that just exist in that first week, right? Community agreements need to be reviewed every time young people meet. It only takes 2 minutes out of your time. So you can't tell me you don't have time to review your community agreements, because if you don't review your community agreements, you're going to spend 15 minutes while you're actually facilitating, going back, guys, community agreements, remember community agreements, right? But if we review them ahead of time and we remind them ahead of time that they're a part of this process, it grounds folks and reminds people where we are, right? It's very important, very, very important, because you're only spending all but so much time with these young people in these spaces, right? So we need to make sure that we're normalizing what the behavior is we want to see in these spaces, so that they can start to connect what it looks like at work. So that when they're not with us and they're at the next job, they can still make connections and things that happened with us about what is the behavior that we want to see while at work, right? Because community norms aren't about the work, the behaviors we don't want to see, right? That's important. Just want to say that again. Community agreements, community norms are not about behavior we do not want to see. Community norms and agreements affirm behavior that we want to see in this space. It's always an affirmation of what we want to see in this space, right? Young people go lots of places in here, don't do this, don't do that. This isn't what we do here. Let's talk about what it is that we do here, so that young people understand, once again, when they're at work in other places, what it is that we do here. Right? So, obviously, as you move through this process, there are going to be some difficult conversations. Some of y'all might even know what this game is. Some of y'all might even remember this. If you had an Atari, I'm just putting it out there, right? But they're going to be difficult conversations without a doubt, right? And that's when you really have to more than ever lean in on your norms, right? And those relationships. And if those relationships aren't there, that's when young people stop showing up. That's when young people stop doing work. That's when people stop communicating, right? And that's when adults start getting frustrated as well. And we really need to make sure that we're normalizing talking about how we're feeling. Okay, I'm going to say this one more time. We need to normalize how we talk about how we're feeling, right? Hey, how's it going? Hey, how you doing? Those days are over, right? We can't do that anymore. So when we talk about normalizing this, we talk about this as an activity, right? And we're saying that this is something that you should do with your young people every day, right? Checking in with your young people every day. Checking in is not you standing in the hallway asking young people how they're doing. Checking in is not you walking around in your program, seeing kids going, hey, how's it going? That's not checking in. Checking in is a very intentional time in which you stop and talk about how you're doing as an individual. How are you showing up as a person to this program today? Right? Yes, Ms. Henry.
I'm sorry, I have to share. I have one, this is so on point right here, this thought. We had one of our health and wellness groups last year. She had the idea of what the theme was going to be. She started following all the guidelines on how we're going to start having the young people build on this scaffolding and everything. Great. She comes out of the Zoom room and she's looking distraught. I'm like, what's going on? We go in a private room and she's telling me, I told them we're going to do this and they just start pouring all this stuff out and I don't know what to do with this information, da, 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 da. And I was like, just calm down, right? Tell me what we're talking about, what we're doing. She wanted me to come in and regulate. And I was like, no, I'm going to give you the tools. And all I need you to do is just listen, take notes, encourage the conversation. You're not here to resolve any of it, but clearly there's a comfort there that they feel that they can share with you. She went back in, she allowed them to talk, they took a break, she came back out. She looked like she was so relieved, just based on, by the time that they all got to say what they wanted to say and they felt safe in that space, that what they spoke about was sacred and was just going to stay with them. And although she told them she would share with me, their project was one of the best projects that we had going forward, because after they got through that, she found moments in every single day that they met for them to have that 5 or 10 minute checking in. We didn't call it that at the time, but that's what they were doing. And it helped them to progress. And so she didn't have to do the cameras on. They automatically came on with the cameras and their engagement was different with her. And she even, and the biggest change for me was not them, because I expect that from young people. Young people are resilient. They're awesome. You're there for them. They're gonna show up. But with her in particular, her whole mindset shifted when she first started to when they finally finished the project, and her openness to just kind of letting go. Because some of us, you know, adults, we like to control everything, right? Letting go and letting them lead the project. And it was a totally different project than what she thought she was going in there to help them to facilitate.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. And a big part of that going through that, I'm sure there were a lot less moments when she had to like troubleshoot things happening between the group, because the group had gone through something and now understood, and that they had an opportunity every day to be like, yo, you know what, Jack, you've been getting on my nerves the last couple of days. And I just want to let you know you've been getting on my nerves the last couple of days. All right. And Jack's like, okay, cool. I didn't realize I was getting on your nerves. What happened? You know, and you can start having those dialogues, but you have to normalize that. Right. And you have to make it something that young people understand, that when I come into this space, it is something that's going to happen. Right? Because there are a lot of places where they don't get this opportunity, right? One of the things, and as you've seen in some of our trainings, is we like to give them like mechanisms to do this, right? And it's through giving us weather reports, right? One of the things I like to also say is this is very relevant, right? If you don't actually watch the news, folks, it's going to be pretty warm today, but it's going to get chilly over the next couple of days, right? Just so you know, okay? But really using this as a mechanism for young people to talk about how they're feeling, right? So if a young person comes on and says, you know what, I'm feeling a little cloudy today, and there might be some rain later, you understand why that young person doesn't want to turn their camera on. But then you check in with that young person in the side chat on the side later, and you say, hey, you know, you mentioned you were cloudy and that there was some rain coming. What's that about? Or one of their peers will be like, yo, why are you cloudy today? What's causing the rain? Right? And that's how we start to normalize it. We give them these mechanisms, because it's very difficult to be like, you know, I'm feeling really sad today. How many of y'all would get on a Zoom and tell somebody, a group of people, that you were feeling really sad today? None of y'all want to. I know none of y'all want to. If you raise your hand, I'm gonna put you to the challenge the next time we do a PBL 101 training, and there are 150 people on the Zoom you don't know. I'm gonna put you to the challenge, right? So even we don't do that, right? So we have to make sure that we're giving our young people real actual processes for how they can go through this process, right? And one of the things that I will always encourage folks to do is, if you're going to do something with young people, do it with your staff as well, right? Because when staff understand the benefit of doing these things, they start to understand the importance of doing it with young people, right? And we all understand that over the course of this summer, things are going to get difficult for your facilitators. If you're a facilitator and you've never done this before, I'm just letting you know, things are going to get difficult for you at some point, right? It's inevitable. You're dealing with teenagers, you're dealing with emotions, you're dealing with different perspectives and backgrounds, right? And feelings, right? These are things that are going to happen. So we need to make sure that we're doing things up front intentionally in our program design to make sure that these things exist, so that we're not throwing them into the mix in week 2 and week 3 to try and fix things. Oh, we haven't been doing team building. I just realized that. Maybe we need to do some team building. Kids are like, yo, I don't even like these people anymore. You can't fix this, right? So those are the things that I'm really trying to impress upon folks before we even get into these project plans, because this is really important. If you don't put some of these things in place, all these project plans and all these great ideas and all this stuff you're thinking about now in terms of the actual project-based learning piece will not be as fruitful as you would like them to be. All right. So, folks, what is research? Can somebody tell me what research is? What is research?
Satisfying your curiosity.
Satisfying your curiosity. Okay, I like that. I like that. That's a good way of looking at that. Anybody else? What is research?
A study of something that uncovers the facts or draws your conclusion to something.
A study. Who does those studies?
Everyone, in a sense.
Okay. That's important, to be open-minded and understand that everyone. Okay. Anybody else? Perspective on what research is? Do folks think their young people have a misconception of what research is? Do you think your young people know what research is?
Good afternoon. This is Todrick from Henry Street.
Yep.
I think some of them know what research is. Some of them, then you have others that know but don't know that they know, if that makes sense.
It makes 100%. You know, I never say 110% because I know that's not real and doesn't make sense, but that was 110% correct, right? That made total sense, Todrick, and I hope it made sense to other folks, right? Because young people conduct research on a daily basis. Basically, almost everything they're doing on this device is a level of research. Hence, all these people making money off of them doing the research for them, right? So we need to dispel anything about what a researcher is or what research is with our young people, to understand that they already possess a lot of the tools to do this, right? We just need to show them how to do research in a way to come to, like you said, Monique, a conclusion or a project or a final coming to, right? So I tell people all the time, one of my biggest things that I do is little R research. Every time I'm in a session, I'm doing some level of little R research. I generally walk out of, a summer season, an SYEP season, with 2 or 3 other ways to engage with young people on Zoom or other activities. I hear all sorts of other ideas. And then I also hear challenges that folks are facing, right? And I'm able to talk to DYCD about some of these challenges, right? So like one of the things that was always a problem was, listen, we're trying to train people, but they haven't hired them yet because they can't hire them because their budgets aren't ready don't go live until this day. And they've changed that process, right? Now you can hire people earlier, right? That's literally because of the things that were happening in sessions, literally because of the way trainings were happening and people weren't able to train people properly to do the things and the work that DYCD wanted y'all to do, right? So when we talk about little R research, right, we're talking about over the course of these couple days, right? You guys are not selecting a topic. You're solely selecting a theme, right? And we'll look at what theme exploration looks like so you get a feel for what you can do with your young people, right? PBL is about the journey and the process, right? Your presentation is literally the findings, right? It's literally could be where you are at that moment. You might not have even come to any conclusions. You might have actually led to more questions, but that's okay because you're literally presenting on the work that you've done to that point. And that's project-based learning, right? What we want those young people to walk away with is those skills that it took for them to get to that point. Does that make sense to folks? Project-based learning is literally a presentation of where your young people are at the moment. They don't have to come to a final conclusion. Some of the topics that they might have, or some of the topics that they might be doing, if they come to a conclusion in these 6 weeks, we need to get them in the White House next week, right? So being clear, like if they're really doing something, and if they come to the conclusion in some solution, man, we need to get them on Shark Tank too, right? But being clear that that is not the expectation. The expectation is that they're presenting on what their process was and where they are now. That's a big part of the presentation. What was our process like? What did week 1 look like? What did week 3 look like? Where are we today? Right? And at the center of a lot of this stuff revolves around some level of community mapping, right? So when we're talking about what can we do with our young people around trips and things like that, get them out, let them walk around in their neighborhoods. That's a low cost, low budget. Everybody can do it, right? And it's beneficial, right? And oftentimes really does bring to light a lot of things in young people's minds that they might not have necessarily thought about prior to walking around in the neighborhoods with that type of lens, right? And I'm sure a lot of them they're a little young, but you know, some of your older teenagers definitely understood some things that happened during COVID around some of the inequalities that existed in our neighborhoods, right? It became very clear. So just making sure that folks are also thinking about community mapping as a little R kind of research method. All right. Let's see, where am I? 10:45. Good shape. So SYEP Pride, okay? SYEP Pride is a DYCD initiative, okay? It really does bring to light the importance of young people in the LGBTQ plus community. And there's some great resources that New York City has to offer. And this is really just making sure that we're bringing to light that this stuff is important, specifically when we talk about the workplace, right? So one of the things that you'll be challenged with is, if you go through this process, is really thinking about how do you make this connection to workforce, right? But when you start to think about it, right, and this is why we're here to help you a little bit, we talk about these places being safe and inclusive, right? But when we start thinking about it, right, and we're gonna go into some breakout rooms for a second. I'm gonna give folks an opportunity to mix and mingle and talk a little bit and share some ideas about what you might be doing around this. What are the areas in the workspace that need to be improved in order to make the space more inclusive for the LGBTQ plus community? That's the question I'm gonna ask you to solve. What are some things when you're in your breakout rooms that need to be improved in the workforce space in order to make it more inclusive? All right. So somebody just got out of here. She's like, breakout rooms. I don't do breakout rooms. That's for the teens. So we're gonna do some breakout rooms. About 4 to 5 folks in here per group. I'll give you 8 minutes. We're gonna give you 8 minutes. Make sure you introduce yourselves. That's always really important. One of the things that we know is that several of you will be on these Zooms for the same trainings, right? Several of you will be. And you'll be hearing each other's ideas and be like, "Ooh, that's a good idea. I need to follow up with that person." But you never follow up with that person because you never get an opportunity to really connect with that person. So we're going to put folks in some breakout rooms. So make sure if you want to connect with that person that you do what you need to do to connect. But definitely talk about the question at hand. And I'll also broadcast this into the breakout room so folks can see it. All right. Breakout rooms are open. All right. So talk to me, good people. I don't know what that noise is. Talk to me. What are some areas that need to be improved to make workplaces more inclusive?
More awareness, more information is what I shared, Michael.
Okay. More awareness, more information.
Our group discussed a couple things, including like, you know, even small things where you're using examples of people from the LGBTQ plus community in, you know, whatever presentations you're giving or cultural touchstones you're trying to reach out to. And also just like being really conscientious of names and pronouns and letting people know that they're seen and identifying the way that they want to be identified and that you're, you know, respecting that.
Excellent. Thanks, Stu. One area you can focus on allowing there to be a safe space to have real conversations, be open, honest, and transparent, using wisdom. Okay. For all community members. Excellent. Thanks, Deanna. Anybody else? What about things like physical things? What about physical things? Anybody think about any physical things that might need to change or be improved?
Maybe gender neutral bathrooms.
All right.
At the workplace.
There we go. We're talking about, now we have to think about restrooms, right? And making them gender neutral, right? So when we start thinking about these things, right, and start thinking about all the things that need to happen in order for places to be more inclusive, right? Really quickly, before we take our break, what are some of the jobs and careers that come out of the conversations that we just had? What are some of the things that are associated with that now?
Like positions in DEI, you mean?
Yeah, there you go. Now you have a whole new people have whole new branches in their organizations now, right? So now you have folks that work in that department, right? What else? What are some other jobs or careers?
Are you asking within the workplace or on a whole?
Within the workplace, right? If we're talking about making workplaces more inclusive, right? We talked about the new department, right? What are some other things? What are some other jobs and careers that now come out of it?
I know, like here at Queens Community House, we have a LGBTQ plus outreach coordinator for youth services.
So now you have a coordinator, right? Yes. This is going to sound funny, but now you have an architect, you have some level of construction that's involved, right? And I guarantee you, there are companies that specialize in creating bathrooms and spaces that are more inclusive. Guarantee you. I thought you were trying to say something, right? So when we start thinking about how do we start expanding the conversation, it's not all about like the feel piece. There are a lot of physical things that need to be taken into account that oftentimes that's where we fall short on, right? And we don't take those things into account. Okay. So those are the things, like as we start getting young people to think about the things associated with these spaces and this topic, how do I get to be a trainer on these things, right? How do I get to that space? How do I get to be part of the DIE committee, right? How does that happen? right? How do I become a part of that world as a young person? What does school look like for me? What kind of training do I need as a young person, right, to go down that career path, right? So those are the types of things we have to start thinking about, being really creative and getting young people start thinking about. So if we want to make these things happen, who makes these things happen, right? Now there's also legislation. There are all sorts of things that start to come into play when we think about how some of these things get changed and things get put in place. Does that make sense to folks? All right, so we're gonna take a 5-minute break. During this 5-minute break, I will be showing a video. All right, welcome back, folks, welcome back. So really quickly, anybody shout out, what were some of the careers or jobs that we also saw associated with that video outside of the community health worker? What were some of the other jobs and things we saw associated with that whole program? Made some of that program possible, some of the jobs associated with that. Feel free to drop it in the chat or unmute yourself. But just to highlight, it also took, community officials to be involved. It also took the folks at the various hospitals that were involved in the training of those folks. So just being clear like that, when we start watching videos and incorporating things like that, asking those questions for young people as they're watching things constantly through the lens of, so what are the jobs associated with this? What are some of the career pathways associated with this, right? Because a big part of project-based learning is making that connection to workforce, right? Why are we doing this? Why are we talking about these things, right? And it gives young people a thought process that, okay, once I do leave this project, if this is something that has stimulated me and it's something I'm interested in, I at least know how I can get myself engaged in it and move myself forward if this is what I want to do for my life living, right? So it's really important to make sure that when we're doing stuff with our young people, we're keeping in mind always that they should be looking out for what are the job and career pathway opportunities that they're seeing. Like, who are the other folks that are popping up just besides who might be the main focus of the actual video that you're showing, right? All right, so we have one more thing to talk about, and then we're gonna close out for the day. Definitely wanna be respectful of folks' time, because I know folks are pretty busy. So when we think about elements of a healthy community, right, there are all these things associated with those things, like social justice, transportation, access to care, affordable quality housing, community safety, economic opportunity. As you can see, the list goes on, right? And one of the things to ask your young people when you do things like this is, how can you connect these things to job and career exploration, right? When we start thinking about all the different things that actually fall under healthy community, right? Now we can start talking about all the things that go into place that make some of these things happen, or just focusing on one of these specific topics, right? But it just really does give our young people and give facilitators lots of space for conversation when we're talking about the notion of a healthy community. So just really giving you some other language and some other options to really kind of do this. And we'll also share this resource with you all. One of the things that I want to highlight is that, I don't know if folks are aware about the website, but the website even is live again, and you can go on the website. There are materials that are posted. We're getting the final approval on these project plans before they get posted, but they will be posted very shortly as well. So you can definitely go on the DYCD website and look at the facilitator workbook and get a lot of the information that we'll be talking about from there as well, and the resources from there as well. So really being clear that it starts with asking young people a question, right? Getting them to start to think about things like, what does this mean to you? Do you understand the meaning of these things, right? That starts to get the conversation going around, well, what does this look like in your community versus other communities? What does this look like in Queens versus in Brooklyn, right? And just start having open dialogue around those things, right? So visual images often help. It's really hard to get young people just to talk about, well, what does a healthy community mean if they don't have things to stimulate them? So using things such as this, this healthy wheel here could be very beneficial to getting dialogue going. So the 7 project design elements, talk about this a lot more in depth during project-based learning 101, but really making sure, like I said, it starts with a challenging problem or question, which really leads to a sustained inquiry, right? And that sustained inquiry is real rigorous research. And like I said, it shouldn't be anything that young people can figure out by Googling, right? It should be something that requires, and they can see several different opinions and perspectives on, to ultimately hopefully come to a conclusion based off of the research that they've done over the course of the summer. Then there's a level of authenticity, right? That you haven't selected the topic for them. Like I said, you've selected the theme for them, but you haven't selected the topic. The authenticity comes from that challenging process, from that sustained inquiry, that research that they've really dug in real deep around, so that it's something that's meaningful to them, right? If it doesn't have any meaning to them, it's going to be really difficult to keep them motivated and on task over the course of the summer, right? And like I said, as the summer progresses, this notion of student voice and choice becomes even more and more inevitable, more and more prevalent in the space, right? In the beginning, a lot of their voice and choice is going to be about how the group operates, right? And how we communicate and function as a group. That's where a lot of their voice is going to live. And then it starts coming in with the challenging problems and the sustained inquiry and things of that nature. And this reflection piece, right? This notion of reflection is huge. One of the things, like we said, is we want to make sure we're preparing our young people with the skills to not only get a job, but to keep a job. If they're not reflecting on the process, right, and their growth as participants in this program over the course of the summer, a lot of times all they walk away with is whether they had a good time or a bad time, or whether they made enough money to buy enough clothes for the upcoming school year, or whatever it is that they want to buy, right? So we want to make sure that through this process of reflection, that they're understanding their growth as individuals and as a group through this process. And I also want to make sure that we think about how we do that with our staff as well. I think Ms. Henry mentioned how that staff member grew over the course of the summer, and how beneficial that is, especially for our younger facilitators that are working with young people for the first time. Just that reflection on what that process was like for them, and how they grew, and folks that have been doing this for a while, things you've had to change and adjust in how you work with young people, right? Because we can't say we're just gonna keep doing the same thing over and over again. These kids are different, and you keep doing the same thing expecting a different outcome, right? So being clear that even as facilitators and as folks that work with young people, we have to adjust and reflect on how we do things as well. And then this critique and revision process, right? This is really critical, right? And it's critical to involve young people in this process and multiple levels of staff, because at the end of the summer, really thinking about what critique and revision looks like on program design will be really critical to your success moving forward. So over the course of the summer, making sure that you don't necessarily wait till the last week, because during the last week, after everything's gone really well, it might not be a great time to sit down and let's talk about critiquing the process, right? Because then some of the bad things that happened over the course of the summer might be the things that they walk away with, but making sure that it becomes something that's part of the process. So young people are reflecting on how the process is going for them, so that maybe you as a facilitator can make the adjustments that you need to make, right? Like I said, when the young people were doing the team building exercise on that last day, they were like, man, it would have been great if we had been doing this all summer. If that program had designed their program in a way where they were getting feedback from young people, the young people might have said, hey, we want to be doing some team building exercises, right? So being very clear that we need to be intentional about how we bring that stuff into our program design. And then this notion of the public product, right? The public product is in project-based learning is not a final project, right? The public product is a presentation of the process of what's gone on for week 1 to where they are now, right? Some folks will come to conclusions. That'll be great. Some folks will have more questions, right? Some folks will be like, we just want to highlight this to our community or to people. That's great. But those are all different things that are all completely acceptable in the project-based learning process, right? Young people do not have to be done with the project. They just have to be able to explain where they've come from and where they are now, right? And where they think things could go in the future, or, you know, other questions that might arise from that process, right? The last thing I want folks to really think about over the course of this process is, you know, what are young people doing? What are facilitators doing, right? The voice and choice and the youth voice is a real critical piece of project-based learning. And there are some youth workers that are really, really good at knowing how to incorporate young people into the process. There are others that are not, right? As a result of the ones that are not, you have to be extremely intentional in your planning and how you make sure young people have roles and responsibilities in your program. Everybody doesn't know that when you break young people up or people into groups that you need to designate a scribe, a reporter, you know, all those things that happen and roles that we take on in smaller research groups, right? So being clear that if you want people to know this, you have to put it either in the lesson plan or do it in the trainings that you do with your staff, but don't make them assume and don't make the assumption that they know that those are roles and responsibilities young people take on during these processes. Does that make sense to folks? Right. And then when we're talking about staff, right, and their role in the process, being as clear to them as possible that project-based learning is a youth-led process, right? A big struggle in project-based learning is adults understanding their role in this process and letting go of some of the things that they traditionally hold on to when doing work with young people, right? Project-based learning is a completely different spin where we're really using the process to help young people develop skills that will be necessary for them to be successful in the future. Critical thinking, communication, right? Problem solving, resource cultivation, right? But if we're not talking to them about the process, having them reflect on it, giving them those real meaningful opportunities to develop those skills in our programs, we will only hope that on the last day of the program, as they're leaving, that they'll be able to do these things. All right. So we have a couple resources that we just want to make sure we offer to folks out there. One is the Ypar Hub, the Youth Participatory Action Research Hub, which is led by Berkeley. It is in all of our resource guides. I will also drop it in the chat in a second. But it is a great website that really does break down how to talk to young people about research, right? And they have a few things that help dispel the notion of who's credible to do research. And then there's the NYC Unity Project, which is a great website that the city has that talks about housing for young people in that community, that talks about jobs and education and a few other things. But it's a great resource for your young people that might be a part of that community, and for your facilitators that might need some more education as well. So yeah, check those two places out. Like I said, today is really an opportunity for you all to ask questions about the process, and I want to make sure that we do give folks that opportunity, but I also don't want to just like keep going through, this is a youth voice and choice program. You have to make sure, because I can do that forever. But I really want folks to understand that, be aware that there are 2 new project plans One was the SYEP Pride, and the other is Healthy Communities. And those resources will be available on the website shortly. And really want to turn it over to the group to ask you if you have any questions about the process, about anything going on SYEP, non-contractual, because you all know I don't have the answers to that.